Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Rinkside. Here with myself, Ryan Steeves, and Emma Miskew. How's it going, Emma?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Great, not as relaxed and as recovered as you. I understand you were gallivanting all around the world, recovering from a grueling curling season. How was the trip?
Yeah, trip was really good. Did some hiking in Spain, part of the Camino de Santiago trail. So that was really cool. Did some relaxing, ended our trip in London at the Beyonce concert. And now I
Wow.
am home and back to routine. So it's
Yeah.
always nice to be home after a vacation,
Yeah.
sleep in my own bed, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Well, thanks for getting right back at it with us here in Ringside. And I couldn't be more excited for this week's guest, someone I've been bugging for a little while, right from the get-go, Tim Powers. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be here with you guys. Emma, it turns out we were in Spain at the same time. I was there. My son was doing a clinic at Real Madrid, so it was an awesome time to be in Spain.
Yeah, it was like the weather was so beautiful. That's funny that we were there at the same time, but great place to go and great time of year for it too.
We're making
Yeah,
Ryan feel bad now. It's
I
it's no
know.
Rockland, Ontario, buddy. Let me tell
No,
you, it's
no,
no
no,
Rockland.
no. I was at a ball diamond, a rink.
Yeah.
What was it? Doing nothing glamorous. Although there's nothing better than watching your kids play
Absolutely.
sports. How about that plug? So, Tim, I've always said if you want to find someone busy, find a youth sports coach. And so there's many reasons we could have you on today. But there's a few that pique my interest, and we connected about this podcast some time ago. Tim, for our listeners, is a very busy professional, is the chair over at Summa Strategies, doing an amazing job as a public affairs company. You do work with Abacus Data. You have a bunch of other little businesses. One of my favorite businesses of yours is my favorite provider of beer at Dominion, over at Dominion City Brewing Company. I tell you, that Sunsplit got me through the pandemic. Thank you for that.
Here to help, Ryan. Here to
Yeah,
help.
exactly. And an accomplished career outside of those professional accomplishments. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about your role with Rugby Canada. You had a very tenured stint there, and then your upcoming exciting adventure with the Canadian Olympic Committee. Um, so with that, Tim, I've got to admit, I picked up a podcast episode you did last year with Chris Ayoette. Is it
We'll
Ayoette?
say, yeah, yep.
Yeah, the Northern Centennials podcast, and I thought it was amazing. It was about an hour and 15 minutes of Tim Powers and the background of your family. I really found it fascinating, and I encourage everyone to go check that out. It was episode 29. I made a note. So for those of you who've never heard of the Sentinels podcast, go check it out for a really fun background on you, Tim. It was very illuminating. So with all that, Tim, I'm going to propose a big question here. What has been the impact of sport in your life to get you to where you are now at operating at the national levels, now at the Canadian Olympic Committee? Talk us through maybe the impact of sport on your life.
Well, I think you two can particularly appreciate it. You both come from team sports. You both have certainly done much better than I have in team sport. But for me, sport has been the glue of my life. It has built friendships. It's given me values. It's given me resiliency. It's provided so much aspirational opportunity. It's helped form business relationships. A lot of the businesses that I'm involved in, I always look to see if others have had a background in sport. Why do I do that? Because I think, as you two would appreciate, and the listeners and the viewers of the podcast would appreciate it, when you've been involved in a sport, you've probably navigated a lot of things and dealt with a lot of different personalities. And I think if you bring that, whether it's to the business world, the philanthropic world, it's a great thing. And right now, for me, it's so much about the future. I mean, Ryan, you often hear me speak of my niece just recently. Jiggy Schoenfeld is her name. She just captained the under 20 Canadian rugby team in Ireland, and she's potentially going to the Pan Am Games, Youth Pan Am Games in Paraguay. And the fact that she is a role model for her 9-year-old male cousin, my son Patrick, really inspires the hell out of me. We live in a time and a place where sport is so necessary because the rest of the world is so tumultuous and uncertain. So, a lot of reasons.
That's good. Yeah, what a fun twist here. Tim and I came to know each other through minor hockey, and one of the first things I figured out and put together that Jiggy was my niece's roommate and teammate at Queen's Rugby. What a small world. And that's the power of sport. That's the power of bringing people together and just finding all the connections. I know you, Tim, have talked so much about one of the reasons why you love sport, and I've heard you say this, is the community, right? The fraternity. And I know that's one of the best things that you've preached about rugby. Rugby has that, it just has a different feel to it. I played high school rugby. I have a deep admiration for the sport. Many people see it as a rough and tumble, gruesome sport, but I love rugby for that, the war or the battle that these players go out on the field, but yet how fraternal and how the community that picks up the minute that final whistle blows. So, Tim, you were a national level rugby player, U21, I believe it was. Yeah.
2 seasons with the Canadian under-21 team before rugby was professional. And again, like both of you, their prevalence of getting an education and the lack of opportunity that was there on the professional side. I don't know whether I would have made it or not made it, but the university took over and the journey sort of ended there. I came back and played a number of years later. But as you both know, when you step out and you're competing full time and you try and come back years later, it's kind of a different aspect. So,
Yeah.
that's where I got this nice scar and the broken nose, coming back and missing plays and missing time. And, the facial reconstruction of coming out of retirement was just a highlight.
That makes
Yeah.
me grateful to
Yeah.
play a non-contact sport. I'm telling you that.
Totally.
Having played sports and then being in a role that is with the Canadian Olympic Committee that is sport-based, how do you find your competition side and growing up being around sports is impacting your role with the COC now?
Yeah, it's a great question, Emma. I was lucky. I had the opportunity before going to the COC to be with the National Sports Federation. So 10 years with Rugby Canada and got to see the sport from a different level. I'd been a coach, I'd been a player, and then went on the administration side. And I learned a lot in that. And I think I brought that experience to the Canadian Olympic Committee, which is very similar in that you have a lot of people who are obviously there for the love of sport, first and foremost. And the Canadian Olympic Committee touches so many sports and influences so much potential opportunity for athletes and for Canadians. And I think what I brought to it from all the different things I saw was just a different perspective. I think when you sit on a board, you're not there just representing the athletes. You're not just there representing the sponsors. You're not just there representing the coaches or the administrators. You're trying to bring all of the knowledge that you've hopefully accumulated into asking the right questions about the things you're being asked to consider and keeping the passion. The one thing I love about boards that are involved with sports is we're all there, it seems, because we're passionate. And it's very different to have so many type A people in one room of significant achievement, not me, but the others who are all so keen to just keep driving forward. It's such a positive energy, and accountability is at the forefront of it all because you come from environments where your KPIs are measured all the time. So you want to make sure you bring that to the boardroom table.
Yeah, saying what you said about just the athletes, the sponsors, everything else, I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to organizations, and knowing a little bit about even just the workings of Curling Canada. It's not just about how the athletes perform and which athletes, what teams are win their way to go and represent Canada, but you have to take into account the event side, the sponsor side, all this. There's a bigger picture there. So that's a tough thing to manage when you're also the results of the athletes directly impact sponsor funding and funding from the government and everything like that for these athletes too. So how is that managed? Because I've always wondered, because they can be completely different things.
Yeah, I think, look, you're an Olympic gold medalist. You've won medals. You know the power of the medal, and you know the power of the gold medal. So the thing with the Canadian Olympic Committee and most national sports organizations is about producing results. And that results are whether they're World Cups, Olympic medals, World Championships. That's what they start out being about. And that's what leads in sponsorship dollars often. But now I think rightly, whether it's the Canadian Olympic Committee, Curling Canada, Hockey Canada, all of those organizations are now realizing, oh, we have another mission. What's that mission? To engage more people in not just viewing the sport, but participating in sport. and making it affordable to do so. That's the conversation that is now coming more to the fore. I mean, I think at Curling Canada, we talked about this before we went on the air. Somebody who I have a tremendous regard for, and Ryan's heard me talk about her often, is Kathy Henderson. Another rugby connection. Kathy was the vice chair of rugby when I was the chair of rugby. She was your CEO for a while, Emma, at Curling Canada, and I knew part of what she wanted to do was grow the game there. She's done the same thing at hockey, growing the game, wanting to grow the game. Because growing the game is also, yes, it's about future revenue and future engagement, but it's also now more of a social responsibility. So bringing that discussion to the fore is an interesting one now, because for high performance organizations, that means expanding the lens. It isn't just about strength training and mental coaching and having all the right equipment and going to Milano Cortino 2 months beforehand. It's about, all right, okay, we have a social responsibility to fulfill. And a lot of that, which is really refreshing for me, is being driven by the high performance athletes who are saying, hey, if it weren't for this opportunity and me being here, I wouldn't have experienced all of that. So I've got to give back. And I love that part.
Yeah, I was really interested. It's not every day you get to talk to someone like yourself, Tim, that was at the table at that
Well, you
executive.
do at the rink, and poor
Well, I
you,
get
but
to. I have this special window, but not everybody does. And, one of the things that always interests me, because I've not been at that table, is what is that connection to these, the people running Rugby Canada, Hockey Canada? Hopefully one day we get to ask Kathy that directly. I'm so intrigued by that connection to, the power of sport and impacting at the grassroots youth level. So how much of your job with Rugby Canada was paying attention to that? I know that the bigger goal here is to help the club succeed at the national level and win championships or gold medals or whatever it may be. So how much attention at those tables is now being paid and pushed down to the grassroots level?
a lot more, because look at all the three sports we come from. Rugby,
Yeah.
declining numbers. Curling,
Yeah.
declining numbers. Hockey, declining numbers.
Yeah.
You are not doing very well with risk management if you are looking at your sport and constantly feeding the top, but the bottom is like sand. It's just moving away. And there are different reasons in all the sports for this. There's broad societal reasons of cost, but it tends to be near the top of discussions now. I mean, Emma will know from Olympic prep. When you get in that window, you got to lock in, you got to zone in, and so do the organizations. But in the back of your mind, the administrators are thinking, all right, if Emma Miskew and Rachel Holman get another gold, that's great for them. We're happy for them. How do we tell that story, particularly to younger athletes, male and female, about, all right, look, these women committed to this sport, and they went and they did this, and you can do it too. Yeah. So it's, sport membership, using the opportunity that modern sports produce through wins, through the Olympics, through Instagram, through all social media platforms to get people in, is a top discussion right now.
Well, here, I'm going to challenge you with something, because one of the things that I witness through sort of everyday youth sports and being on the sidelines for it and often coaching them is I find athletes' families are now trying to skip this whole generation of foundational development, and they're all seeking out the biggest, the best tournaments, the best teams. They're chasing something, and I even see it in hockey. And this is where Hockey Canada has a program for young kids now called the Gold Medal Pathway.
Yep.
And that directly connects what 12-year-olds are doing to the World Junior Championships, for instance. So we're measuring success by how that team does on the world stage, and then extrapolating it down and simplifying it for young kids. So I still think there is this connection with national success and what the major sports entities are doing at the youth level. But do you see that, Tim, in maybe rugby or hockey with your involvement, that there is this rush to sort of skip over the foundational steps of sport?
And you pay the price for it. But yeah, there is. I mean, look, the money still comes from wins. The money still comes from the exposure that wins and participation in high profile events produce. Now, there's some change in Emma's world. The Grand Slam of Curling, run by an old rugby teammate of mine, Nick Sulsky, is about trying to take and Emma can correct me where I get this wrong, but my understanding of it, it's trying to take the very uniqueness of curling, the culture, the athletes, the community that supports curling, and make it more mainstream and make it more accessible, and to use some of the monetary benefit that comes from that as well to get people participating. But you're not going to take the winning out of it, and organizations that are mandated to create winners will still be driven by that. Often it gets into the politics of sport, which we all know, and we again all come from national sports federations where it's assumed the provinces and or the communities, and we all came from community organizations, do the development, do the focus, do the unique things there. But you're not wrong, Ryan, but I think it also comes back to parents and coaches and others saying, hey, we get you want us to produce gold medal athletes, but there might be one in every 250 athletes we touch who's going to be has the potential to be a gold medal athlete. The other 249, we need to build a love of the game, a love of the sport, a love of what they do, and the values of sport that they can take into the other world experiences that they have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what's unique too about what Nick Solsky and the curling group are doing for curling is that they are outside of any particular country needing to show results. So they are trying to grow curling as a whole for the whole world. And that is like tapping into different markets in different countries that are really into the sport, as opposed to needing to have their Canadian team bring home a medal or their Swiss team bring home a medal. They don't have to worry about those particular results because they don't have that government looking to see, okay, so where did our money go? And so it's actually an outside group that is trying to just grow curling because they love it and showcase different athletes and different skill levels and different countries and trying to communicate with, it's very new and it's exciting, but it is definitely helping. And without organizations like that who are just trying to grow the game for the love of the game, and of course it's a business too, you don't know where the future is going to hold. So it's exciting times for us in our sport. And also with, the PWHL coming in a couple of years ago. So we're getting there. We're getting to see, especially for women, to be able to, and young girls, to be able to see that a sport that they love could be also professional and profitable, as opposed to the boys can pick a lot of different sports and have that. So I think it's like the right direction, but it is a matter of showing these kids that you can pick a sport that you love and you can keep going through it and enjoy it and like really try to love it. And you could have a future in it, which we didn't see like much when we were kids.
So Tim, let's segue a little bit. What would be your pitch to parents that are, adding these traditional summer sports to their kids' calendars, baseball, soccer? Why should they give rugby a try?
I'm having that discussion with my son's mother at the moment. In fact, she actually supports him playing rugby. I would use my niece's story because it's very similar to something Emma just touched on. So my niece was a good hockey player, really good hockey player. But there was no PWHL. So all along over the summer, to stay fit for hockey, she played rugby instead of soccer because she loved it. She liked the contact. She saw the crossover aspects of it.
Yeah.
And now, in a month, she's going to a next generation camp. What does that mean? It's, as you guys know, that's on the track to going to the Olympics. If you're a female athlete and you want to play a sport that has contact in the summer, that isn't soccer, play rugby. If you're a parent and your kids are younger, play it for the culture, play it for the opportunity, play it for the opportunity to build a little bit of resiliency. Ryan, you and I have had this conversation many times. I don't know how good a job we as parents are doing on helping kids in this era build some skills of resiliency. And this is not to say, woe is me and we had it tough, because I've met your parents. They're lovely people. I'm sure what I read about you, Emma, your dad was very involved in getting you in sports. So we're all very lucky to have parents who helped us along. But I think even over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been made a little bit easier in terms of how we deal with wins and losses, how we deal with challenges that come to the fore. And rugby still has the ability to build a little bit of resiliency because of the way the game itself plays. And it's fun and it keeps you healthy. I don't care what the sport is. Like, go out and do something. Get kids off screen. Yeah. The biggest threat to all of our sports, arguably, for younger people is esports and e-gaming.
Yeah.
And no knock on people who do it, but it's a little easier to potentially to be on a keyboard than it is to spend hours throwing rocks or shooting pucks or hitting tackling bags. So whether it's rugby or anything else, just build a love of sport because it carries you through life.
Yeah, rugby still, the people in my world that are at the youth level of rugby it's got to be one of the more accessible, welcoming, lesser known
Cost is
sports.
another point. Yeah, to your
Cost.
point.
But there's this just welcoming environment to it, which is fascinating. Hockey can be a really scary environment to wade into in Canada. Not always the most welcoming and difficult to navigate. So, where do families go for rugby? Are there, it's a club-based thing as I understand it. Should, if parents are interested and maybe you're going to sell them on it here, where should they go?
Usually you'll find it if you go to, depending where you are and what part of the country, most cities will have some listing in their sports section when you're looking for sporting programs of where you can get rugby. But Google it. Like if you're in Oshawa, there's a great team called the Oshawa Vikings. In Charlottetown, there's the Abbeys. Like Google rugby community, rugby club, wherever you are, you'll find one. You'll probably find one that, as you said, Ryan, is very welcoming and will love to have you part of it because there are so many ways to enter the game. And with, two different types of the game, the Olympic sevens model and the more traditional fins model, as they used to say to me, it takes all shapes and sizes to play rugby.
Yeah.
And if you've been to a rugby match, you will notice that is true.
Yeah.
And there's positions
totally.
for everybody. So Google it. Google.
And when does contact start at the youth level?
Contact now is at 12, so it's just before your hockey starts at 14, right?
Yeah, that's right.
12. And
Okay.
it's important, as you guys know, to learn the very basic skills as early as you can, particularly when you introduce contact, so it can avoid the injuries. Look, there's lots of myths out there on head injuries. And rugby being one of the worst sports, or more data that I've seen would suggest that, soccer and American football have more head contact, but that's a debate, a debate for another time. And we all know the history in Ottawa of the sad story of Rowan Stringer and how that changed laws in Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, I was injured, maybe you can say the same, more by cleats than I was by shoulders to the head.
That was a lovely cleat I got.
Yeah, exactly.
University. Thanks, guys.
That's great. Okay, thanks for that plug. It's because I am one of these parents who's interested in rugby because I played it. I had a great relationship with it, but I picked it up in high school when a high school rugby coach came in and said, "Who are all the contact players? Who are all the hockey players? And we need you." And I didn't know anything about rugby, and I got to pass backwards now. It was all so foreign, but I'm so glad I was introduced to it.
Well, let me just give it one more plug because back to what Emma said about professional sports. There are 3 professional women's rugby leagues around the world dominated by Canadians. The Canadian women are ranked number 2 in the world, both in the Olympic sevens version of the sport and in the 15s version of the sport. And they're all incredible human beings. Our women's 15s captain, a woman by the name of Sophie de Goody, was a double-letter athlete at Queen. She played basketball and played rugby. She's a trained chartered accountant and one of the most articulate, able people I ever met. Now, she did have a good gene pool because her dad and mom were both captains of Canada.
Wow, pretty good gene pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that is growing too. There's I think there's a player from the States that's kind of grown her social media around Alona. So she's actually a great follow for anyone who not only wants to learn a little bit about rugby, but also just she's funny and it's funny to watch.
And here in Ottawa in August, Canada plays the United States, TD plays, so Alona Marr will likely be in the lineup.
So that's one of those things that we wanted to also highlight when we started Ringside was telling people where they can watch sports in their city. So coming to Ottawa, that's exciting. That's something that you wouldn't get the opportunity to do very often. And everyone's always looking for things to do here. So that's great. I feel like I'm going to try to make time for that.
No kidding. Yeah, thanks for that, Tim.
Tell the Grand Slam of curling to buy a box.
Okay.
And tell them that. But just on that, where to watch, I think that's Ryan and I were at a presentation for our
I'm glad you're saying this.
Sons hockey team's end of year banquet. And we're lucky to have the silver medal winning coach from the women's rugby team. And he had a great line about, how do you coach modern athletes, and particularly those that have grown up in the Instagram social media age. And Ryan, correct me where I get this wrong, but the part that stuck with me the most was, it isn't about, even though we see so much of the sports, and I just look at my own son who watches all his highlights on through my phone or whatever tablet he can steal. But Jack Hanratty, the coach, said, I tell my players, don't think about the Instagrammable moments. Think about the moments that lead to that moment. And that is something tangentially that connects to what you're talking about. We all watch sports there. Well, how did they get to that place? And can you get to that place where maybe you are that Instagram highlight through the 10,000 hours of non-Instagrammable work that you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Love it. Love it.
I think we've said that before too.
We've talked about it.
Yeah. Just the highlight reel comes from somewhere, and there's going to be so many moments that not only like maybe the opposite, the bloopers of the Instagram, which is still part of sport, and to be able to embrace that too. And I think that's something Alona actually does, is she's like really good at making fun and kind of teasing herself. And I think that's what makes her a really good follow. But yeah, she's really I didn't know a whole lot about women's rugby, and I started following her, and you learn so much. And I think that social media obviously has its downsides for athletes, for everyone, for children, but being able to follow athletes and get a little bit of an inside sense of who they are as people. They're not just the person that you're watching play a sport. They are humans, and you learn a little bit about not only them as people, but what kind of work level they have to put into doing what they do, and a little insight into their training. And I think that sort of stuff is really good for motivating kids to be like, oh, I could do that too. That looks really cool.
I can tell you just on that, sorry, Ryan, I know you want to move on, but my son has developed a fascination with track now. And I have seen the 1988 100-meter final about 1,000 times, and been asked about Carl Lewis and Ben Johnson and all that fell out there. And then all of the Usain Bolt moments. And it's fascinating because a moment ago you mentioned it, Emma, they're watching the training aspects of it too. It isn't just the finish, it's how they're going through that. And it's so important that all sports responsibly use those mediums to bring kids in and see the work that goes in and the stories. I mean, everything's about authenticity, and social media, when it's good, gives you authenticity.
Yeah, I think these documentaries that are starting to surface now, like the F1 one was one of the first to go sort of behind the scenes in a different way. I wish they'd make those more geared towards the athletes. Yes. There's a lot of swear words in them. There's a lot of, it's just not centered around the athlete experience. I agree. I've been like the old crotchety podcast guest host here, talking about how I hate TikTok and Instagram because the kids want to see the fancy goal. Yep. They never want to see, it's hard to get them to sit down and watch a whole game of anything. They don't want to see that. The Jason 30 is the worst. It's great as a fan, but it doesn't teach kids much. And you can gain so much by watching a full game. So I've probably said that in every single episode, Emma, now. Sorry about that.
Well, but I think there's a mix that is needed.
Yeah.
The little highlights that you can watch on social media can draw you to watch more sports. So there, I can see both sides.
Yeah, and you're a great example as an athlete who's really engaged with their fans. You've got such a great following for sort of giving that behind the scenes, and so many athletes are doing it. And I'd actually say so many of our Canadian women national champion level athletes are doing that so well. I'd, Tim, challenge you, find a better country for the success of its women athletes, right? You talk about rugby, it's a silver medal on the global stage. Our soccer program is incredible. Emma and Team Home, an incredible, legendary team. We produce obviously a lot of great women athletes.
And Summer McIntosh breaking 2 more records in the last 2 days in the pool.
Yeah.
I know.
We've got world-class female athletes who constantly push the Americans, which is hilarious given the spending discrepancies between American athletes and Canadians. They're amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, I have to ask you more about your recent election to the Canadian Olympic Committee's board director. What a cool gig, Tim. What a cool time to be doing this. I had to dig into, what do you do on this board? So maybe I'll let you, again, I just can't think of a cooler, more privileged, neat spot to be in for our country and its athletes. So tell us a little bit about what it looks like. What does it What does it take to be a board member?
Well, I've had one orientation session so far and another one later this week. But
Cool.
what I would say is fascinating right now is, look, again, Emma, you've been to an Olympic Games. We love our Olympic Games in Canada, but we're not going to have one for a very long time if we do, for a whole bunch of reasons. So if you think about the Olympic Committee, originally a lot of these Olympic committees were built to run games and get athletes to games. Now the role is changing. And what we're seeing, or what I'm seeing now, just month into this thing, is sport funding in Canada. Huge issue. No increase in high performance funding since 2008. Though the Canadian Olympic Committee doesn't run athletes per se himself, that's National Sports Federation. That's on the agenda. Participation, getting kids into games, getting them playing, healthy and well, doing that. Advocacy internationally and domestically with the new federal government. Mark Carney, arguably the first prime minister we've had in a long time, who wore his medal for his love of sport so vigorously during the election campaign. With Adam Van Couverden as the sport minister, presents an opportunity. What does that look like? So that's part of it. Helping set things up for Milano Cortino and looking ahead to LA, though the discussion predates me and is driven by the IOC. What do you do about the Russians? What do you do about global aggressors and whether they should compete in sport? And that age-old debate about that is all at the forefront of it. Integrity and protecting safety, that's not going away, nor should it. The whole conduct and behavior, it's not, it was the Canadian Olympic Committee when Obu was there, who fell under great scrutiny, as they should have, for the alleged and actual apparent behaviors of Mr. Obu. That hasn't faded. Sport has improved, I think, but, like society, sport needs to move on. So all of those things seemingly the forefront of the table. Broadcasting, what we were talking about, and storytelling. I mean, I found it fascinating yesterday in an orientation meeting. I think I can share it. I will. Talking about, and Emma, you might have experienced this in 2018, the strict controls that exist for athletes around how they can present their image and their story when they're actually in a games. And that's fascinating because it goes back to the conversation about authenticity and connection, and is the IOC caught up, and how all that works. So all of that is on the table. So it's really neat to be in there. And the last one I'd say is, because this is you've heard me say it a couple of times, but I think we as a country and a world need sport now more than we've ever had. With so much dysfunction, with so much uncertainty and instability, sport has the power to do so much good, to overcome so much angst. And I think Olympic committees are recognizing that, as are other sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait to follow you along with this, Tim. It's pretty cool.
Lots on the table there.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting and important too. And as an athlete, I feel like the more people who come in and are sitting on the board that have an insight of what it was like being an athlete, and that's only helpful for all of us, knowing that we're taken care of.
And it's interesting, right? With the Olympic Committee, you do have Tricia Smith, wonderful person, probably connected with her, Emma, before. She's the president. She's a former rowing champion. She's on the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. The vice chair is a former Olympic athlete. The athletes rightly have a place at the table through what the Athletes Commission, who elects them there. Mark Tewksbury was just the vice chair of it all. And the interesting thing, again, Ryan, which you know from a lot of the legal work you do, is the governance of it all. So when you come and you sit on the board, you're not athlete. You may have a place as athlete representative, but you're part of a team, and your fiduciary responsibility is to the organization. So that tests you a little bit. How do you bring forward the perspective of an athlete while at the same time center that with what is the greater good that could be done for the organization? So I'm looking forward to see how that plays out in this environment.
Yeah, and I won't put you on the spot because I presume no comment might be the more appropriate response from you. But what I pay attention to is what's going on in the U.S. with the NCAA. So this ability, first of all, the nil deals, this ability to monetize your name, image, and likeness, that all rocked the boat for the NCAA. And then recently, there's a new court decision that's come down that saying that schools will now engage in profit sharing. So they're actually going to share revenues that the school makes with athletes, not even equitably. They're being pretty transparent. So that's a really interesting thing to follow, because you hit on it, Tim. Part of the COC's mandate and the purview, I suppose, is to ensure that rules around that, about how athletes can monetize during games in particular and the lead up to it, is strictly controlled, which is why it's so hard to go and find, the video of the golden goal. You try to go and hunt for these things. It's all so tightly controlled that I wonder how things are going to be changing in the coming years with, how the IOC and COC manages that.
I can speak to the rugby experience that I had when I was chair of Rugby Canada and Kathy was the vice chair. I mean, we had an athlete strike, our men's Olympic sevens team, because be fair to them, they were like, all right, well, we are going to 10 international events a year. We want to monetize this. And in the strangest twist of fate, they structured a union relationship with the iron ore workers of Canada. I don't know how that all worked out. And the union fell apart, but what it was more about was we recognize we have value. We put our bodies and our identities on the line. We think we should have a piece of the pie. And it, like any dispute, it was about everybody not existing with the same level of information. It basically got fixed when people understood how the revenue worked and how they benefited from it, how the organization benefited from it. But athletes rightly should always ask questions about, all right, I'm doing the work here. You're investing in me, yes, but what is the return I get? And that's not going to change. That's only going to increase. I agree with you, Ron.
So the last little topic I want to ask you about, Tim, is your foray into coaching. And I know I've gotten to know you as a coach of your son, but I think you had coached before that. And so what's that been like, going down to the grassroots and getting on the ice or on the field as a soccer coach with these young kids? What's that experience been like, and how does that inform some of these meetings and policies and activities that you do at the board levels?
Yeah, I had about a 15-year gap because I coached a lot of rugby at different levels and at varsity level, and like you in hockey. And then when my son started playing hockey and they were short of coaches, I certainly didn't have your hockey experience, but dove back in, and I never will have your hockey experience. It's been, I think I would say it's the most enjoyable thing I do. And yeah, there are ups and downs, and you and I talk about them, and I'm lucky to have you and others as sounding boards to navigate some of the, just family and other circumstances you're going to have in any sport that come to the fore. But it's the thing that makes me the most happy right now, because it's such a wonderful experience to see young athletes and families grow together, to see the twinkle in their eye, the desire to learn, and the challenges they provide you with good questions. They force you to learn and engage and learn to communicate. It's so amazing. And I think, to answer your question, it just grounds you, right? Because at the end of the day, there are 5 Canadian Olympic women gold medal curlers. There aren't 5,000. And the other 4,995 are going to go and enjoy the sport and have fun and do it for their lives and cheer on Emma and Rachel and everybody else and think that's wonderful. And for me, when I go to the boardroom table, even though we are dealing with Olympic gold medals and the like, it's about, all right, yeah, there's the 5 there. But what about everybody else? And remember what it's like. Remember the journey, and remember why we all love sport. So that's what I bring to it. The passion from just, you've seen it, Ryan, and you've seen it, but the smiles, like first time somebody makes a shot or an assist or what do they call it? The bar down, or our guys like the bar downs, Ryan. But, all of that, it's so amazing when you see it. It's electrifying.
Yeah, like you said, it's about building those relationships too. And I think like playing on team sports like that, like I still have some of my best friends from team sports that I played on, and you meet other people that aren't just in your school. You meet new groups, you find out who you gel with as teammates. There's so many benefits to playing on team sports, especially at the youth age. So it's great that you have an impact there and are a part of that and keeping kids in those sports. And I think that's we need more people doing that for all different sports.
Yeah, can I just add, if Ryan's plug is the pathway, mine would be this, that we need to, mine is kids should play a lot of sports. And I think you touched on
Thank
that,
you.
Emma. Like,
Thank you, Tim.
can we stop specializing at such a young age? I mean, you both know about athletic literacy and body literacy. Like, let them play. Don't put a kid in a sport at 8 and never let that boy or girl do something else. Let them go out and try. Let them enjoy, obviously within your financial means and the time you have to come to it. But, this notion that somebody should be specializing at sport before they're in their early teens, and even then, don't do it. Let them play a lot of things and let them have fun.
Yeah. I
Yeah, well
completely
said.
agree.
You came to the right place to say that, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no controversy there here. So, Tim, I observed you as a coach, and I think you sell yourself short when you say, well, you don't have my experience, because maybe you didn't have a lot of, or as much hockey experience as maybe some hockey coaches in the minor youth sport level. But I think you brought something really special to the group that you coach, what I saw last year. And it was, in the light sort of went off for me when I listened to that Northern Sentinels podcast, because it's something you said at the very, very end. You were talking about a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote. And it was something to the effect of, success is really measured by making even one life better. And it went off for me, because that's really how I've been approaching coaching without realizing what I was trying to do. And, you're never going to make everybody happy. That's the one thing you realize at the youth level. In fact, you're probably going to piss a lot of people off if you're doing it right. But it really is about that, right? It's about, if you take that kid at the very bottom of the skills grade and you get them engaged and really make them enjoy that sport and continue on with it, that's an achievement. That's success. And if all these kids leave and get all these other coaches, and they go back and they say, well, Tim really made a difference. He taught me some valuable life lessons. That's success. And so I appreciate you saying that, because it really connected a lot for me, observing how you coach and then thinking about sort of what my goals are. So I thought that was really poignant.
That's kind of you. A lot of people did that for me too. I really believe, and I suspect it's true of you too, mentors. And I can think of people more from sport and a little bit from work who were, who help with the resiliency, who help with the persistence, who help with the emotional growth too, because you're not just growing as an athlete, you're growing as a human being, and lots is changing in your life. So thank you. But that I truly do. That Emerson quote is one I try to live by. If you make one life better, you're doing okay.
Yeah, you've done many more than one, but keep it up. You're doing great stuff. And I meant it off the top. You want to find a busy person, find a youth sports coach, and that is you, Tim, for all you do. When I started to prepare for this, I thought I knew you. That was the surface. What you're doing for the community in every corner of it is impressive. So thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be here with Em and I.
Yeah.
Great to be with you both, and wonderful to see you guys doing this too. It's so important to have people who are still in sports, still competing, still coaching, talking to people, because they can learn from it. So thank you for what you guys do too.
Tim Powers, thank you, buddy.
Thank you.